How's it going? Yep, it's me in a different format than I've ever had to do for this podcast. If you watch or listen, well, I guess you'd only know if you watch, but if you watch my other podcasts, you know that this is where I sometimes do podcast interviews because it's easy. It's, my room. So it's way easier to get things recorded and set up here, but I hope you're doing well. I have a few things to talk about, and I'm gonna, just start talking about them because today's an interesting day in the cresting of my busy schedule. So, might as well talk about it. So, first of all, thanks again for choosing my content. I mean, any content in the sea of content is hard to pick. So even if you've clicked on it just now and you're curious, I appreciate it. And, you can check out my other podcasts, Mitten Backstage or Life is a Piano, if you want to hear me talk to other people. But if this is your first time listening to the Dutch Snedeker podcast, you're in for, I don't know if it's a surprise, rather. It's just you're coming to the ending of this podcast series. And I know some people might be like, what? The one person out there is just like, what do you mean? But let me explain. As you can kind of tell, I'm still a little stuffy. My throat is not as sore. I am not as fatigued. I am not as sore. I'm not as exhausted. I'm still tired, but not as exhausted. And I spent, what was supposed to be like, it wasn't supposed to be a long or particularly, extravagant vacation. But I took basically a full day off, and then it was a later check-in on Friday, and then a later check out on Sunday. All I had planned to do was maybe go for a trail walk, maybe go do the fall thing and pick up some donuts and cider. But all I did was stay in the Airbnb that I had rented, and I slept. I stayed, pretty much in either a recliner, a hot tub, a shower, or a bed. Anywhere I could stay warm and comfortable and not have to move. It wasn't COVID. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing anything. I wouldn't have gone to see Neil Francis this past week. I wouldn't have played the shows and the weddings I did the weekend prior, even masked up. I wouldn't have played the wedding I played the week prior, masked up. I just, when you're younger, in your earlier 20s, you bounce back even with bad habits. And I'm running out of I'm running out of bad habits that are sticking, and noticing a lot more when I don't treat myself in the ways that need to be treated. Getting enough sleep, getting enough nutrition, getting enough activity, managing stress. All those things are important to keeping the engine moving. And a lot of the time that I would have had to do other stuff, I just spent resting. And it was definitely needed. And I'm glad I did it. Even if in the moment I had to like skip going to a concert and, just spending all day in a house with just like, okay, cool. Some amenities, it's a relaxing time away. It's clean, it's quiet, it's secluded. But I mentioned at the top that if you are tuning in to the Dutch Snedeker podcast for the first time, we're approaching the natural conclusion, in my opinion, of what this podcast started out as. It started out as an exercise of improvisation. I turn on the camera. I don't know what I'm going to talk about until I start the theme song or start talking my way through something, and then kind of get into a rhythm of like, this has kind of been on my mind. I can speak on this. Or this, last week it was a story. There's always stories in the freelance world of just people, doing extreme right or extreme weirdness by you. And I say it's reached its natural conclusion because what I want to take this podcast and turn it into is the type of commentary video work that I like consuming, where people just have fun with a topic and riff on a subject, and they don't take too long, or they take 45 minutes and they make a crazy detailed documentary or something. And I feel like each of these podcast episodes has taught me how to stretch a topic, talk about a topic, move in and out of tangents, move in and out of stories. It's helped organize not just my thoughts, but the process of how I process thoughts, I guess. The process of how I take, ideas and turn it into some sort of action or bit, or something, generating ideas. It was like a podcast. This podcast has been an idea generator. And all year I've had moments where I'm like, yeah, once I make some videos, I can like, I have these ideas for commentary, or like, this would be a fun idea to try. And I'm doing 2 other podcasts in addition to this, and those are good for what I'm able to do with them. And I want to get them to a point where they're a higher production quality. But realistically, and if the past couple weeks of me being in and out of sickness has taught me, being a one-man operation means I have to put equal time into the work I do for others as I do the work on myself. And then, I say that as someone who gives a lot of his time away and a lot of his energy and skill sets away. Now it needs to kind of shift, because I've already demonstrated that I can do work for others. I need to show myself that I can do work for me and focus on the things that I need. And it's a journey. I've mentioned, in weeks past, the journey of health and wellness. I've just kind of been hovering around 260, which is down almost 50 pounds from earlier this year in April, which, cool. That's great. I'd like to keep the trend going just to, be healthier, have more natural energy, hopefully build up a better immune system, I guess. I don't want to have fall be this hard pumping of the brakes. If I can get into a rhythm where it's like, oh, I know I can take, a weekend and be good, instead of being in and out of it because I feel a little bit better and then I let up for a second and then I get, exhausted and I don't take the actual rest I need to take. And then you end up with, being sick on what's supposed to be a vacation. But, the podcast was always nebulous, this podcast in particular, because it, building on the premise of improvisation, that nothing nothing is in terms of like the pre-production is crazy. Nothing is insane with this podcast. I mean, it's basically I record myself talking and noodling unless I don't have the room or space to do it. Um, like here at my room. Uh, and then I just see what happens. There's no like, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to do this. You know, sometimes you have a story prompt, but I'm not like storyboarding it because most people think that video ideas are just like if for creative types, they think it's like, oh, they're these YouTubers, they're just, or these indie film, maybe not indie film, but like internet videos. There's a thought that it's like, oh, it's just this, and sometimes it is just people dancing or people doing certain camera tricks and just wearing nice clothes or just doing pull-ups with abs, and that's the content. And how easy it would just be to to like have that be the content. Obviously there's the discipline that it takes with fitness, but in terms of like how do you storyboard doing pull-ups? Like, all right, you're gonna pull up, and then when you go back down, you're gonna pull up again, and then I'm gonna just move this camera to show your muscles all working, and then we'll play a popular song in the background and make it into a TikTok. Like, that's more on the fly than like, all right, we're gonna, have a topic and then research the topic and then workshop the topic and then, riff on the topic, record different takes, different bits, record segments, record the full thing, check video and audio editing, and then rendering that all into something usable, and then taking that video and putting it up and then promoting it. Like, there's a lot that goes into each video. And even if I personally would zoom, like I'm using Zoom right now to record my camera in widescreen for the YouTube version of the podcast, and that was a choice. Audio can be finicky or kind of compressed internety sounding on Zoom, but for whatever reason, if I use OBS, it'll shrink the camera window, and I don't know why it does that. But on Zoom, it works widescreen every time, so that's what I'm doing. But you know, being one person editing all of these things and not having it be my only thing going on, that's tricky, because I get it. Like, some people, they work a 9 to 5 and then they come home and they put in like 4 or 5 hours into YouTube, and YouTube's not the thing that's making them money right now. They're doing it as a creative passion. But when you're in a creative job, every job needs nurturing in some capacity. I was thinking of getting a 1 hour practice routine going again, where I just hit certain markers and have certain goals, and then make kind of an idea of like what types of music I need to learn, what music I have to transcribe and learn for different projects I'm in, make sure I'm confident in all of those things, glean new information from transcription, um, play around with music tech, like explore my synth library, find some favorites, interconnect my computer with my hardware, with, having software and hardware interacting, you know, like there's a lot that just goes into that aspect of being in different groups, that I can't just play, I'm not just playing piano, I'm playing different keyboard sounds, using effects, trying to emulate certain instruments I don't have. um and that's, there's a lot of time that should go into those types of things, and I want to devote more time. But I also noticed that with the podcasting, it's going to be better for me to focus on the two with guests because that's just where people seem to be gravitating towards. Does this also mean that the Dutch Snedeker podcast will never exist ever again? Not totally sure. I want to leave it in 2021 and then, you know, put out commentary videos, put out other types of things to kind of push myself. But, you know, I can't just like spend all of my time editing random podcasts when I want to create other types of things. I started podcasting because I liked the medium. It's not about the quantity. So if I only have 2 podcasts, it's fine. I can focus my attention more on that. And, trying to grow the Patreon to a point where I can pay a videographer to help make clips and, get these episodes disseminated a little bit better than just their large formats. And, it's a lot of time. It's a big time sink podcasting. The people who do it with a little bit more, intention behind it, well, maybe not intention. They do it with a little bit more of the trying to get the highest quality possible. You're recording separate mic feeds. You're editing everything, making sure you're getting rid of like little pops and other things, some of which can be managed just through the environment you're in. If you're in a controlled environment where there's not a lot of reflection in the ambient space, like you're not in an echoey room, if you're not using mics incorrectly or types of mics incorrectly, if you're recording to something and then you don't spend time like EQing, mix, like balancing the voices in the conversation, creating something pleasant to listen to without the extreme highs or the, in terms of EQ, like the crackles or the staticky fuzz or the, the, I don't know, the hollowed out mouth. It's a lot of work. So I would like to devote more work and attention to the podcast episodes with guests because, it's like I'm inviting them into a little piece of my home every time I have a podcast. So I'd like to, dress it up nicer for seasons going forward. And that speaks to the bigger thing too, is in seasons of your life, you want to focus on learning different things, and it all builds towards the stuff you're trying to do or wanting to work on, and it takes time. So I started the end of last year being like, yeah, I want to do 3 podcasts, and one of them is going to be twice a month, one of them is going to be every Friday, and one of them is going to be every Sunday. And the twice a month one kind of fell off for a chunk of the fall because of scheduling and my own personal schedule. And then I had to miss a week of Mitten Backstage because we were in the studio with Earth Radio and there was no time to do anything. And I hadn't scheduled ahead. And then same with the Dutch Snedeker podcast, I had to miss a week. I'm pretty sure. I feel like I've had to miss a week. And that's where there's an advantage to doing a lot more interviews ahead of time. Especially because as topical as I'm trying to keep a lot of these podcasts, sometimes it's just better to understand, the guest you're trying to interview and knowing when to schedule. And, I still have like a couple album reviews I need to publish, and I still have, lingering stuff that's just been eating away at at my schedule and trying to do it all with, like 20% in the tank, just kind of going, flooring it in first gear the last 2.5 weeks. Has just been, a realization of like, okay, there is a harmony to be found within the types of work I'm doing and the time I invest in everything else. Um, and I need to do a better job of that. So, you know, partly this episode is to reflect on, what season I'm in. Not just like, oh, we're heading into winter. Like, this is a season of wanting to create more music type stuff. And I have music projects that have been lingering for a year, 2 years, 3 years, you know, things that ever since I got done with school, I said, like, oh, I'll have more time. I won't have to go to, you know, chunks of the day with classes and then interspersing that with practicing and then attending different rehearsals and then going to see a concert or going to support a friend or going to whatever, doing a gig. And life just always gets busier. There's never a full time where you're like, I'll have nothing to do unless you burn every bridge or you say no to every single person deliberately. um you know Obviously you want to choose the one that's like, hey, I need to take a month. um and it's, yeah, John Stewart put it pretty plainly. I've probably mentioned this in another episode, but we live in relentless times. Uh, so think of, social media as relentless, constant notifications, the constant like checking your metrics for validation. I even looked down right now because I saw something reflect in my glasses, and I'm like, did I just get pinged for something? Because I have three different obligations this weekend. I have a show with one band in Saugatuck that I need to keep an eye out for, like a set list so I can run some tunes, because I only really have a little bit of the chunk of Wednesday and Thursday to do it. um, and then Saturday I have a gig in town. um, so that's going to be a chunk of the day. And Sunday I have a recording session um, with music that I have to brush up on. And I'm happy that I'm at a point, and I've been at a point for a while, partially because of school, partially because of just throwing myself into a lot of music experiences and having to learn things on the fly, learn things the day of, learn things the night of, learn things on stage. People just calling tunes like, no, it's easy, just follow me. And you're like, okay, it's probably four chords, it's probably similar structure. Sometimes it's like, oh, it's a 12 bar blues, but the turnaround is this. Or oh, it's 1 4 and 5, and then in the bridge it hits the 6 and the 4 and then the 5, and you're like, okay, what's key? G, cool. And then you just follow along like you naturally would and pay attention to anticipations or hits, or when things slow down, when they speed up. You just try and you know go along for the ride. And I'm I know I will hit weird notes in places, but I also know that if you tracked me without um having me hear myself, but there's something around me to play off of, I'll play it. Because people are like, there are no right or wrong notes. It's like, yes, I guess in terms of improvising and adding color to harmony and recontextualizing how a root note from like a bass instrument interacts with a chordal instrument, there are no wrong notes. But if you're talking about playing an Americana tune that's like 1 4 and 5, you're probably not going to be playing a lot of minor stuff. You're using the minor note to slide to the third. You're not playing a lot of like sharp fives. You're not playing a lot of like substitution chords. You're not doing a lot. Like, those things can work if you put it in the right spot. But if you were to take me completely, like, oh, your stuff's tracking, you just can't hear it, which has happened. I've had to do that. Um, you just you go with like the theory and the muscle memory of just like, okay, I'll just play in G. I know how to play in G. Oh, bluesy, I'll lower the seventh and from the F sharp to the F. So it's not so much like, oh, woe is me, I have to learn music and things are busy. It's more of, I want to be busy and know that the things that I'm busy at are balanced out by the skill set, instead of being busy just pouring hours and hours into, like, stuff that could be polished more, could be improved more. And I think that's this idea for Dutch Snedeker podcast turning into, future commentary style videos, even if it just starts with one a month. It expands what I'm able to do, and it also, it allows me to expand on topics in a different way without having to just rely on basic conversation. I could instead focus on other things that make me just as excited to riff on, or different topics, or different things that involve me playing too. I want to make more stuff that involves me playing, because I was realizing a lot of the posting I was doing in the past year includes some of my playing. And sometimes, if you follow bands that I'm in, you'll see and hear my playing. Or if you tuned into streams that I did earlier this year, you could see that type of stuff. But I want to get that stuff dialed in, because it only helps everything. If I'm able to make a commentary style video on a topic, that means I can work with other people who do the same type of work, and they're, cross pollination in that way. Or if I focus on, improving my live stream setup and getting things more dialed in, and understanding, the gain staging better for equipment like my XR18 or something, that improves my knowledge of that equipment, and it makes it easier to use for other, like, oh, we're going to multi-track record this concert, or we're going to, you know stream it. Then we're going to use this as the interface and run, mirror the lines from the house to the mixer. you know like, that would be sweet if I could just roll in with like a handful of cables and just plug it into my computer and set up a stream, and just have people be able to listen in with good quality and all that good stuff. But yeah, it's really about clearing space. um as I also, came home from my vacation rest this weekend, um I part of my day today is going to be literally just cleaning my room. Because, you can kind of tell in the video, like, if I were to pan my camera, you'd be like, oh yeah, you should clean your room, because there's just random, like, oh, this is just laundry, like, let's take care of that. This is just, I have to unpack this bag from the trip. Oh, I have to, I said I was going to find a place for these, or I said I was going to put these up for sale, like, let's do that. Okay, I have the bin that's for Goodwill, let's make sure that's all set up, and maybe I'll put that in my car, and after I'm done cleaning, and then that's an incentive to drop off stuff at Goodwill. And just the there's always, I feel like spring cleaning happens every 2 months for me. Where I just need to take stock of, like, do I need to have this set up, and I readjust it. One thing I can't believe I've been sleeping on, or rather not been sleeping on, is a comforter for the last year and a half. I got a bed frame only last year, and that was because of the boosted unemployment. It's like, how dare I splurge on a bed frame that has enough space underneath for storage? Um, so, you know, it's it. This episode is me being transparent about hey, it's okay to reassess and reevaluate. I don't see ending the Dutch Snedeker podcast at the end of the year as a failure, but rather a natural conclusion of this exercise. I'm also kind of a fan of things that they have a start and an end before it gets a little too off the rails, or it loses the kind of potency. Because if I'm just going to continue to improvise, there's going to be more stories that would benefit from better organization of the storytelling. There's going to be better, um, you know, better, better opportunities to expound on topics if I have a better organization of the medium I'm presenting in. And it's, if there was ever someone listening to this podcast and was like, well, but I like this kind of this dialogue or this type of thing, that's where streaming could kind of take the place. I could integrate it into my weekly work flow and have it be a part of, something that is entertaining for me, and maybe it's entertaining and fun for people who watch it, or whatever it can turn into. uh the only the only thing I can do is just keep trying ideas, because everyone who says they fail in an art, it's always a complex thing, or sometimes it's as simple as like you didn't put in the work, or understand how to network, or you didn't you know you didn't try an idea. Some people just get hung up on like perfection, and this podcast was an exercise in like just regularly being imperfect. It's not the best lighting every time, it's not the best setup. I tried all these different ways of presenting it, and some of it was cool, others of it looked weird. Ways that I previously had recorded these episodes, um with using my phone as a not a separate camera, but using it integrated with Zoom or OBS. I had issues with that, and you saw kind of the evolution of the format, and it's it's at a point where I know I'm just going to retread the same ground if I keep improvising these episodes. And maybe what I really want to do instead is something I did a few times in the last couple weeks, where I pick usually a later time at night. Maybe I'll start doing it earlier in the day, and just putting on Instagram Live, just some improvisation, and I pick a theme and just try and work through ideas, uh, and you know, there's possibilities for everything. When you're one person trying to create multiple pieces of content, you start to see the synergy that can happen with all the different skill sets you're building, but you might not have the skills in terms of, for me it's always the visual. I'm not a visual crafter in that sense, and I've challenged myself to do more things that involve the appearance of something rather than just the audio. Um, so that's an ongoing thing. I'm sure instead of having just this one light, I'll get something else that makes it look a little bit warmer and a little bit more crisp. And then once I figure out what types of cameras and setups I like, I can use those, and it's all a learning process. So that was another goal of this podcast, was just to have it be a learning process and not be something that added stress or too much time into the week. And while it doesn't add a lot of time, the stress um, is always there, just in the back of your head, like, oh, it's another podcast. I got to make sure I get it up to my patrons on time, and on time being before it comes out publicly. And I had to mute there to cough for a second, but and to you know uh, get into some sort of rhythm of, like, this is when I record these podcasts, this is when I have time to edit. And it was kind of in this nebulous realm of, like, all right, I can record and edit between Mondays and Wednesdays typically. So if I can have the podcasts out at least the day before they drop, it'll be good. Um, but part of, trying to make that happen, there's logistics that need changing. There's other tips I've learned from other people, in just how to, like, I don't know, record more in a batch and get things edited more smoothly, um and not even like technical things, because I don't do the videographer thing of, like, color matching and trying to make everything look like a homogeneous set, which I would like to do that in the future, have an actual set where I could sit down and chat with people in a comfy environment. But with that comes the added hours and of labor, and I want to get to a point where I can just be the person shooting the content raw and then having someone else edit everything together, and it's like a collaborative thing rather than just me trying to put out a bunch of things by myself, um, because I always like collaborating, even if I also like learning. And part of why I do a lot of things myself is because I like to learn. And when other people around me aren't really interested in it as much, um, at least to my perception, I start doing a thing, and then through doing it, I find the people who are also, like, oh, I was just on a podcast the other week, and we were talking about just that behind the scenes and on the podcast a little bit. And so you know it's it's about perspective, and I don't want to give the impression that I haven't had fun making a lot of these episodes. I love storytelling, and I have fun with the little characters and riffing, and I'm sure people got to see a side of me that they don't typically see, because I'm not all, as a performer, there's this subtle, even if it's even if you don't feel it, like, from other people, you feel it inside yourself, that there's this need to perform, or this need to present yourself in a certain way to people. And it's not that I present myself super differently. It's just, I give a range, and sometimes it's nice to just letting my hair down is just being able to, like, sit quietly and relax and not have to be, like, on and, like, oh, look at me go, because I need I need people in my life that I can just, there's no, the only expectation is that I'm physically there, and I just need a breather. Um so yeah, I guess this podcast episode today was just about, this podcast will probably come to a well, it will come to an end at the end of the year. Um, I might do a send off at the top of 2022. It might be before Christmas and be the last one. So keep an eye out for that. But um, yeah, hope your projects go just as well. Hope you have those moments of clarity, those times of growth, those times of rest. And don't be afraid to try something. Don't be afraid to do anything, because people literally make money doing anything. I mean, we just saw the Island Boys blow up, and they're probably already two wealthy dudes who just, you know, they're twins and they dressed super like attention getting, you know, or like you go look up. There's a if you go follow Channel 5 Action News on Instagram, you can see a clip of this white dude who's just like talking smack and being an edgelord and just being like, oh, I'm so mad. And then like this dude comes in from off screen and he's like, nah, bro, he lives in a nice house and he's got like a great family and he's like wealthy. Like he's just saying dumb stuff because that's what people do. And it's like, yeah, you know, most people are just trying to flex and feel like they're, you know, they're better or they're doing better or everything's better. But at some point you gotta realize that a nice watch isn't gonna help give you rest. It might be a nice trinket, it might be a nice thing as a sign of success, but you know, there's other things you can spend your time and money on. But also, if you're into the watch game, no hate. I'm just not a watch wearer, so when I see that, I'm like, why would you spend thousands of dollars on a watch? Like, I get appreciating the craftsmanship, but most people just do it so they can have a quick and easy thing to flash and flex with their ensemble. But anyway, this episode's gonna be over. So if you dug this type of conversation and you want to follow what I'm up to in the future with whatever, DutchSnedeker.com, patreon.com/DutchSnedeker to support everything that I do. And, you know, Mitten Backstage, Life's a Piano, my other two podcasts, you can check those out. There's episodes on, you know, all the same platforms. This one is on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, all the things, YouTube. And yeah, we'll see you in one of the few remaining episodes to come of the Snedeker podcast.